Remote Evil. Book 1. Chapter 31. Terrorized for Life. This audiovisual book was created by Joseph Russell Timpu-Gyson. John Jr. is being deliberately kept in the dark by the investigators. They fear his desire for revenge will get the better of him and he will do something that would land him in jail or something much worse. But he has done his own investigations and with the help of Cherry has also concluded that Norman is the likely suspect. At first he waited patiently for the investigators to do their job and arrest the killer of his father whom he suspects is Norman. But months passed by without nothing happening to the investigations. He even befriended Norman through social media. Norman was friendly to him. No matter how much John Jr. tried to trick him to reveal his crimes, he failed. Norman is just too smart not to know when he is being fooled. But Norman does not get angry or stopped communicating with him through social media. Norman would usually tell him stories about crimes and investigations as if indirectly telling him that he knows he is being investigated by him secretly online while they communicated. John Jr. was finally convinced he is the killer of his father after communicating with him through social media for some time. He knows that his hatred of Norman is getting the better of him. He stopped communicating with Norman through social media. After this, all he thought about was killing Norman. He wanted to just walk in front of him and just shoot him point blank. But he thought of how sneaky Norman is and how he hid his crimes. He wanted to kill Norman the same way, but he lacks the imagination of Norman. He thought about using a bomb to blow up Norman, preferably while at his car, but he is not an expert on explosives. He is good with the rifle and he thought he would kill Norman like what a sharpshooter does to his target, secretly shoot him at a distance. However, he noticed that there were suspicious-looking men tailing him whenever he has his rifle with him. When one day he got too close to Norman, he was accosted by two men who identified themselves as military police and warned him to stay away from Norman and to forget about harming Norman if he has any intention to do it. His superiors eventually talked to him and ordered him to let the investigators do their job in finding the killer of his father. They informed him that Norman is being watched already and if he tried to harm Norman again he will be arrested and will be put in jail for a long time. He was also assigned to be stationed overseas. After his superiors reasoned with him, he reluctantly agreed to leave Norman alone and leave the country as well for his new posting. He left for his overseas posting the same week. Life also changed for Cherry after her ordeal. She was forced to retell her ordeal over and over again to the many investigators, no matter how traumatic it is for her. She was physically examined too. Apparently her rapist applies some kind of powder or liquid or a combination of both in his body, which he used to cover his fingerprints and other body prints. The sticky liquid left in her vagina every time her rapist raped her, and which she thought was the semen of the rapist, turned out to be just a lubricant. The examiners easily concluded that her rapist always uses condom every time he rapes her. The liquid which her rapist first applies to clean her before raping her also prevented the examiners from finding any clues which the rapist may have left behind in her body when he rapes her. As if the rapist insulates his body from her when he rapes her to remain untraceable or anonymous. Cherry was at least assured that she was not made pregnant by her rapist. With her physical examination providing no clues to the identity of her rapist and with the investigators unable to find her rapist, her outlook in life changed. She thinks now her rapist will remain unpunished. She was also told by the investigators how they think Norman is her rapist and how they are unable to arrest him at the moment due to insufficient or that no evidence against him was found. She too wants to kill Norman after hearing everything about him and his alibis, but she was warned by the investigators not to do anything drastic, especially to try to harm Norman. They told her what happened to John Jr. and that a similar fate could happen to her if she decides to go after Norman. They assured her that they are not stopping the investigation and is continuously monitoring Norman while waiting for him to make a mistake. They also told her that Norman is most likely to have criminal connections and that she and her mother could be in very real danger. She was told to keep a low profile and they promised her that they will closely guard her and her mother from now on. Cherry moved back to her mother's house and asked a friend to sell her house. She never leaves the house of her mother. She never returned to her gym job or to her modeling career. She became a recluse. She never talks to anyone and is suspicious of everybody even though her mother recommends them. She gained a lot of weight and neglected taking care of her body. She would always watch the news and crime stories. While watching these on television, she would use the internet to search for things related to crime. She would research technologies related to surveillance and espionage. She would study everything related to electronics technology, especially how remote control works and anything else she can find about drones. She also developed a keen interest in weapons, especially knives and guns. Most of all, she would spend all night most days researching about all the men she knew, including Norman. She used the proceeds from the sale of her house to install a sophisticated alarm system in her mother's house. She also bought guns and knives and carries them with her even in her mother's house. She started smoking and would regularly use sleeping pills so she would be able to sleep. There would be days where her mother would just see her staring blankly outside the windows of the house as if studying everything outside the house. Her mother was so worried that she asked the help of psychiatrists and other mental health professionals to try to help Cherry get back to her former self. But Cherry has changed. She has truly experienced real evil in this earth. She has lost her innocence. She is now on a mission to catch a demon that walks this earth. Her old life is no more. She has to save the women of this earth from this evil. She does not want them to experience the evil that she experienced. She does not want them to change and become like her now. These are her missions in life now. If only she has seen the face of her rapist, then her mental suffering would have ended already. If she knew her rapist, she would have just killed him without hesitation. She never cared about the consequences of her actions anymore. She never cared if she never gets justice or goes to jail. She just wanted assurance that her rapist will not be able to harm her anymore. Every time she remembers that her rapist is somewhere alive and well and maybe even monitoring her without her knowing, it drives her insane. In her mind she is convinced that Norman is her rapist, but every time she looks at pictures and surveillance videos of him, the same question keeps repeating over and over again in her mind: is he really the one? End of chapter.